Hello and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley,
the podcast where three priests link our stories with those of the Reverend Geraldine Granger and other TV vicars. I'm Kate.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Ruthie. This episode we're going to be talking about question time and the real politics that are going on today. April Fools! No, we're not. We're going to talk about humour and comedy and how does that all tie in with the role of a reverend and how does it tie in with the Bible as well? Well, hello, lovely ladies, on this beautiful sunshiny day. It's a delight to be recording this podcast with you again.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, it's really lovely to be recording. We've had a little bit of a short break for various reasons, so it's really lovely to see your faces and hear your voices.
Oh, that's because we're cute.
Yeah. So, Ruby, you're running our COV like this week, and you've just taken a photo of us. And and that's one reason why we are all looking extremely cute today. Not that we don't normally.
I always look cute,
You do.
even when I look haggard. That's definitely not true. But yeah, so it's been a really great time so far. How about you, Jenny? What have you been up to this week?
Very good question. So we are in the throes of Lent. So I've been busy we're doing a special sermon series. I don't think I have mentioned it actually, on generosity, giving, sacrifice and serving. So my life at the moment is, just kind of thinking about that. We've had some new giving packs that we've given out to everybody to encourage them to think about how they belong to our church. And so, just meeting up with people, going through those. We're doing a Lent group as well, so I've been just wrapped up in the joy of Lent. You can't have the joy of Lent, sorry. Just wrapped up in Lent as a whole, I suppose.
Oh, that's a good question though. Can you find joy in Lent?
Ooh.
But
I quite like how Lectio 365 describes it as bright sadness. As in it's a time of, do you know what I mean? Reflecting, possibly mourning, repenting, discipline. But it's also hopeful. This isn't the end of the story. There's more to come. There's brightness as well. Quite like that. Well, that's what I've gleaned from it. It might not mean that, but I might have missed something. But I quite like that. This season of bright sadness.
how about you, Kate?
Well, I have had a really nasty cold the past couple of weeks, which is another reason why we couldn't record, because I sent some voice messages where I just sound like a Dalek or something, because I just sound...
Hello, I feel quite poorly.
I'm sort of finally on the tail end of it. And the thing about chronic illness is things like a common cold really do hit you back. And my mum was saying, my mum has come down with COVID this past week, but it's been really mild. And she was saying to me, I've been sicker, and she's been more worried about me with just a common cold than her with COVID, but it's just unpredictable in that way.
Yeah.
So as we go further into our podcast then, it's time for me to invite Kate to sit in the seat of focus today, as we have some good stuff and maybe some not so good stuff, because I think, Kate, you're going to offer us this week both I'm a Vicar but then later, just after, to step into the confessional booth this week. But tell us, you said today that you had something you wanted to share with our listeners. I'm a Vicar and now this is going to sound like it should be the confessional, but honestly it's not. I'm a Vicar and I've been really struggling to keep up with my Lent discipline this year. For the past few Advents and Lents, I've been doing daily drawings in response to pieces of scripture, and this year, because I've been sick the past 2 weeks, I've just completely lacked creative energy, and I've sort of caught up with drawings, but I've now got a huge backlog, which I'm just procrastinating posting to social media. So yeah, that's my I'm a Vicar which actually though is a good thing, because it's realistic, it's real that we're not always able to keep up with disciplines, particularly when life is difficult, and we shouldn't feel guilty for that. It's okay, God always offers a new start. Definitely.
Yeah, I've been trying to post a picture of something that I'm thankful for each day, and I've already failed twice where I've just missed days and had to do it because life's really hard at the moment for various different reasons, and trying to keep up with the discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of a discipline is that once it kind of gets into your bones and your mindset, then it's easier to do, but at the beginning especially. And when things just get thrown in your way.
Yeah, true.
It's hard.
And I think that's the other thing with a discipline is that they're supposed to be hard as well. And then they're supposed to not come easily, I suppose. And yeah, I think I think one of the greatest gifts of this season is trying something new, maybe giving something up or taking it on, and like allowing that to enable you to draw closer to God. And it's funny how sometimes it's not always in the obvious route that you get that closeness. But yeah, dear listener, if you also are struggling with your Lent disciplines, then no, you are not alone. But it's time now. I feel like we need a little theme tune for this part. But Kate, I believe it's also time now for you to enter into the confessional, as if you haven't done enough repenting today already.
I know. Forgive me, mothers, for I have gone wrong. In a previous episode, we were talking about graveyards and churchyards, and I was talking about how the vicar actually only has extended permissions for certain things within our churchyard and approving headstones and things like that. And I refer to a person who has the absolute say, the adjudicator, as the commissioner, when actually they are the chancellor. And I can only apologise because my brain just doesn't really process the difference. And I was talking to my dad on my phone with my dad, and he corrected me in a conversation because I've got something going on where the chancellor is involved. Did it just then? And my dad corrected me like 5 times, and it just doesn't process in my brain. So yes, forgive me for that. It is the chancellor, not the commissioner.
I believe you are forgiven.
Amen.
I mean, they're very similar titles, aren't they? And I think that's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah.
And do not worry about that at all. I've probably made sillier mistakes. And thank you, Bishop Thompson, for correcting your daughter, as you should, as head of the household.
It's almost worse to be corrected when one's father is a bishop.
Get the smack down from your bishop. Sorry, Dad. So this week we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of going through an episode of the Vicar of Dibley, we thought we'd do a bit of a theme. We're trying something different, so let us know what you think about it. Instead, this week, we're going to talk about humour and laughter and comedy and how it all combines, or should it, or does it all combine with Christianity. And we recognise that talking about that is quite complex, and there will be really quite different views on this about whether you can laugh at Christianity or not. We're not trying to step on toes. We're just wanting to explore this topic and see what each of us thinks about all these different things. To begin with, as it's April Fool's Day.
Happy April Fool's Day.
Happy April Fool's
Happy
Day.
April Fool's Day. What is the best prank that you've pulled? Or have you seen a good prank that you're like, that's genius, I'd like to do that?
Do you know what I think I'm going to be on this podcast? And that is, you know when Theresa May was asked what's the naughtiest thing she's ever done, and she said about running through the wheat fields, and everyone was like, ah! I feel like I'm the Theresa May of this podcast because I'm like Grinch when it comes to comedy in terms of I don't like pranks. I think pranks are mean, and when I think about them, I think about like you've been pranked and like horrible people like accidentally punching other people or making them fall over or laughing them at in times of like hardship or like even if they laugh, I'm still like they got pranked. So I feel like I'm going to be the Grinch and the Theresa May of the wheat fields of this podcast. But Jenny, can I just say though, absolutely love a well-timed whoopee cushion. Like a fart is always hilarious, and let's not deny it.
Of course. But that really surprises me, Jenny, because you are one of the most joy-filled, laughing people that I know. And yeah, I kind of get the you wouldn't enjoy humour of someone being pushed over, but I think there's lots of other things that I could just remember you howling with laughter at.
Yeah.
And I believe I pulled a prank on you.
Ooh,
and
remind
Kate,
me.
you might have been involved in this too.
think
I
I
can't
was.
remember. Do you remember when we filled your bedroom at college with
With fruit friends and
vegetables, fruit friends and vegetables?
That was a prank. That was I guess it was the best prank of my absolute life. Yes, I do remember that. It was lovely, actually. Coming home to loads of friends. Fruit friends.
Yeah, so in Miranda style, who is wonderful and I love her dearly. It sounds like I know her. I don't really. We decorated a load of fruit and vegetables to have faces and characters and personalities, and then just shoved them in your room at college and hoped you'd find them all before they went rotten.
I think I just about managed. I remember they were very glamorous. They all had like massive googly eyes and feather boas. They were like, glorious.
Yeah.
No, I did love that. That's true. But I think that's the thing with comedy, isn't it? It's when do you laugh at a person, or it could be like we're thinking about a little bit later, like at Christianity, and when is it really good to, be easygoing, light-hearted and, take the humour, and when is it like cruel or can come across as actually wounding, someone, do you know what I mean, or poking fun in a way that's
But yeah, I guess that's a difference, though. I think for me, I draw a very clear distinction between what a good humoured prank is, where actually you are laughing with someone because this is something they're going to find funny too, versus something which is actually a mean-spirited thing to do to someone. And I think there is quite a big difference. You've talked a lot about pushing people over and, sort of pranks people play in primary school, like asking you out because they thought you were the most undateable person in the world. But
been there,
that's
done
not a
that.
prank. That's just bullying, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a prank
Absolutely.
is like when you have a shared love of Miranda with your friends. When one of them's gone away at college, getting the key to their room and filling their room with fruit friends because they're going to love it. Or something which is really quite harmless. Like, I think at college, there was a painting of Thomas Cranmer in the common room because we loved Thomas Cranmer.
Well, because we were called Cranmer Hall. Not that
Sorry, yeah, that's what I meant.
Started a fan club.
Yeah. So there was a painting of Thomas Cranmer in the common room because we went to Cranmer Hall, and those of us who lived there started decorating it and giving him some props. And actually that was a really interesting case study between people who found it funny and were really enjoying it and just thought it was light-hearted fun, and then some people who found it really actually disrespectful and offensive.
Tricky.
Or there's a difference of, I guess, my biggest pranking times was growing up with siblings all older than me and having the struggle for sibling dominance, I guess. I don't know. Myself and my brother, who's closest in age to me, who's 6 years older than me, used to... we get on really well, but he was the one I would try to prank in a very childish way the most, like hiding in the laundry basket and something else at him.
That's fun.
But things really... But I remember really clearly things backfired once where I put salt in what I thought was his drink, but then my sister drank it, and I felt so guilty, and I think that stopped my pranking war with him.
I think, Jenny, you might think I'm a mean pranker at times. I think there are occasions where I overstep the line, and I know when it comes to editing this, my other half will pause it and go, yes, you are mean at times, because I Toby's quite skittish and can spook easily. I failed at this recently when they had a really bad day and came home, and I thought the way to cheer the situation up was to hide in the dark with party poppers. So when they walked through the door, I fired them in a hope that would cheer the mood. I was very quickly informed that didn't do the job. But I mean, now it's quite funny, but at the time it was not. I think there's a bit of a trend for me to break into people's houses and do things. So
I'm sorry, I think someone else is about to enter the confessional booth now. Sorry, Ruth, do proceed.
When Toby went on their priesting retreat, I perhaps had their keys in order that I could look after their apartment while they were away and make sure everything was okay, just in case anything was needed. And my go-to prank involves googly eyes. In fact, right here on my desk, as we're recording, I will show you our packets of googly eyes for the microphone. There you go. Because I love putting googly eyes on things, and it's become a bit of a thing. And put some googly eyes on your spices and they will look so cute and adorable.
That is a top tip.
So on this particular occasion, I'd not broken in because I'd used keys, and I put googly eyes everywhere.
That's amazing.
Everywhere where I could. All the milk in the fridge had googly eyes. The pasta, various game boxes where there were characters that were people on. I stuck googly eyes over their eyes, and it was a challenge to see how long it would take to find them.
I love that. Were they grumpy when they came back, or did they love it?
I think, and this probably needs to get edited out, I believe were initially grumpy, but then saw the funny side of it. I believe Toby turned around and said, "You're such a knob."
Truth spoken in love.
Truth spoken in love.
Absolutely.
To be fair, googly eyes is an awesome prank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And pranks, I think often, as I've said, there's a difference between pranking and bullying. And actually, when a prank goes wrong, you do feel really bad.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I mean, I feel so guilty if something which I thought was a shared joke suddenly upsets someone.
Yeah. It's all about intention, isn't it? Like, if you're doing it to bring joy, then that's something different than doing it to make someone feel horrible or feel embarrassed or whatever it might be.
Definitely. Yeah. So I hope our listeners today then have picked wise pranks and loving jokes for their family and friends and church family and community.
Do not hide in the dark when your spouse comes home and fire party poppers at them. Will not go well.
What about church? Have you ever pulled a church-specific prank, or ever been tempted to? I think we have a mutual friend who, when they were training as a curate, didn't their incumbent go away and they moved loads of stuff around the church? Like, moved where the gospel was, or that's something I always joked about wanting to do with my training incumbents when they said, "Oh, I'm going to leave you in charge," and I always joked about completely reordering the church. I never did it, but
at my last church, I had a bit of an ongoing banter war with the wonderful Wendy, who was our administrator, and she had her office items that she didn't want moved from her office because someone would take them and they'd disappear and never come back. And so with the label maker on various items, I typed, "I want to be free, liberate me," things like that, and stuck it on different items in her office.
Oh,
and that was something that continued.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So what about going back on brand to what we do as a podcast and talking about the Vicar of Dibley and the humour and the funny moments that come from that? What would you say is your favourite funny moment, episode? Which one makes you laugh the most? I think the jumping in the puddle is one of the classic moments, isn't it? From trying to impress a date by splashing in puddles and that going horribly, horribly wrong.
Although later it becomes a great hiding place, doesn't it? I know this is skipping ahead.
I love that bit.
But actually, that puddle ends up redeeming itself as the ultimate hiding place from the husband-to-be for Geraldine. But yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I love that bit when she stood at the puddle. No, when she's walking towards the puddle and remembers it and is like, points down at it, no, not you again. And then realises she's completely trapped and she needs a place to go and looks down and goes, oh, there's only one way. I've got to do it, and launches herself into the puddle.
Good. So good.
Apparently they could only do that in one take. And so she had to absolutely nail jumping into that puddle.
Wow. And that she did. I think for me, when I think about Vicar of Dibley, it's like the one-liners that I go to and I'm just like, that's amazing. I know I spoke quite openly about one of the episodes we've already covered, which I just think is filled with back-to-back like one-liners. Not specifically, I mean, yeah, sometimes Geraldine, but also I think there's two standout moments in the Vicar of Dibley for me when I think of the most hilarious times that I've laughed my head off. The first one is Jim, when he gets out the picture of his dog from his wallet because he thinks there might be a glint of the window in his eye. That logic, is so familiar to me and just absolutely makes me laugh my head off. And it's like, just that's, even just thinking about it now, that scene, I'm like, that is gold. But the other one, and I know this I believe this scene nearly got cut, but it's when Alice can't believe it's not butter. Isn't I can't believe it's not butter. And she thinks there might be more butter lying around than we all think. Like, but for me, those two are my comedy gold moments when I think of Vicar of Dibs.
How they got through that scene and kept a straight face with, I can't believe it's not butter. Mm-hmm. Well, I can't believe, and very
brilliant,
definitely.
isn't it?
What about you, Kate?
So I've been thinking about this because I suppose whenever I think of a Vicar of Dibley, I tend to appreciate it more as a whole than necessarily as specific things, like the continuity of the characters being like just continuously funny, and the one-liners that you get across episodes. Like, it's really difficult to choose a favourite episode because so many of those favourite most quotable moments are just scattered through the show. But I suppose I really like the Brussels sprout incident episode, the multiple Christmas lunches. And honestly, this feels like a really basic thing, but I really love that first episode. I could just rewatch it because it just hits home for me every time.
Yeah. I think one of my favourite bits, whole episodes or just scenes, is Alice and Hugo's wedding, and just all the bits that come together, and Alice's dress and the Teletubbies following her behind, and the archways covered in vegetables that's supposed to be like, what film are they did they say Saving Private Ryan? That's the film that they're aiming for, and then
that was Geraldine's
they're going to blow off the bloke's arm, and is that Geraldine's wedding?
I think Owen says I'm going to want to shoot it in the style of your favourite film, Saving Private Ryan.
I'm missing the wedding, and like the bit where for Hugo and Alice's, where that woman comes in to say, you've got to stop the wedding. The groom's already married,
and don't let
your
him
heart
deny it.
Stops, and you're like, oh my gosh, and then she just goes, oh, sorry, wrong wedding.
It's so good.
They have to pick Alice up off the floor, and I adore that episode. I'm just a romantic, so the episodes with romance, I'm always there for.
And what about other TV vicars? Because we do talk about other TV vicars in our intro, somewhat hedging our bets because there's only a limited number of Vicar of Dibley episodes. But I love the Vicar of Dibley. I would have suggested us starting a podcast about the Vicar of Dibley if it wasn't one of my favourite shows of all time. But I've got to admit, I probably have more laugh out loud moments at Father Ted. Like, there's so many more moments from Father Ted that just off the top of my head I can say, like Dougal pretending to be the TV, or every time that you just have those two sharing a room, which is just out of my mind, bonkers. Or whenever the bishops come to visit, and I just it's so funny to me. And obviously I'm not Catholic, but I find so many similarities. And actually I'll often use, when I was a curate, I would often use Father Ted as the explanation for what a curate was like. I'd say, well, you know Father Ted, it's like Dougal, except I don't live with my training in convent.
That's brilliant.
There's so many quotable bits, isn't there, from Father Ted? And I haven't really watched much of it, but I've been introduced to it a bit more now, and we should definitely do an episode on it, shouldn't we? That'd be great fun to do. I really love Jane Austen, and so Mr. Collins in Pride and Prejudice is the most cringy, awful vicar, but also humour-inducing, because I know vicars like this who just kind of are wanting to rub shoulders with the high and mighty in the church, and you know, they talk about who they know as their patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and he's so awful but I there's something really funny in that, the way that Lizzie is just like, heck no, I can't believe you'd even make me marry this man.
But then also how that character is played by different actors. So obviously the BBC version, he is actually repugnant. Like you dislike this man. They really play up the disgust that Lizzie feels. But then in the movie version, when it was released for Keira Knightley, he's more buffoonish. And then
you have more sympathy with him, don't you?
And then Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, played by Matt Smith, he is complete comedy. And I don't feel disgust when I see him. I just think, who is this idiot?
Yeah, so the guy who plays Mr. Collins in the movie version with Keira Knightley, Tom Hollander, he then plays the Rev Adam Smallbone, doesn't he, in Rev?
He does.
So another amusing vicar. But actually, going on to something that I think we're about to talk about other times where it's uncomfortable and should we laugh at vicars, there was an episode in Rev that I found immensely uncomfortable, and that was the point that I kind of checked out of watching it, that I just thought either this is too close to the bone, or I don't like the direction they're taking this, and this is not that it wasn't offensive, it more became that we're being a bit of a butt of a joke as opposed to
really?
And it was the bit when the art guy comes and makes that statue, and Adam sees it. He's just, spoilers, he's just kissed the teacher, and he looks at the statue and thinks that it's him kissing the teacher, and so pushes it over to destroy it. Man, and actually then when you look at it, it isn't, but it's his subconscious coming through. And I get why they did that, and I understand it. And yes, clergy are very guilty. Well, not very guilty. That sounds like we're all having affairs, but
just as human as everyone else.
There are clergy. Yeah. But that was the point that I just went, I can't.
Interesting.
No.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that part.
The thing about Rev is it is very much based on actual people in that diocese. I know someone who knew someone who was involved in a production of Rev.
Same!
And they were saying about how, the archdeacon is very much based on an archdeacon.
Oh, wow.
And I think and that's true of a lot of the characters, and I think what makes Rev harder to watch, because I've got to put my hands in the air, I really haven't watched much of Rev at all. And I think the reason I find Rev really difficult, because it falls more into has been a particular period of more kind of cringe comedy, a more kind of based in a more grim reality. And I find that a really difficult type of comedy to watch. And I think there's just something about it touching a bit too close to the bone, or trying to be too realistic, which for me makes it really hard to watch. But does that mean that it's bad? I think it's just not for me. Everyone has different types of humour.
And I think there's also something about needing to watch those things that make us uncomfortable at times. And looking at it and going, actually, is this how the world society perceives clergy at times? And kind of putting a mirror up to ourselves and going, yeah, this is where we get stuff wrong and where we mess up, and we need to acknowledge that and say, right, okay, I understand why people might see us like that, therefore we need to either change or whatever it might be. So there was the episode, wasn't there, of Rev with the hip and trendy pastor who came in his chinos and his the checkered shirt, and people who were from the more kind of that kind of more like Hillsong HTB, charismatic evangelical church. There were some people who got really offended at that, and there were bits of it that I just found hilarious, because I've been in that kind of circle and just said, yeah, that is the uniform that they wear, and like they think it's different from wearing a collar, but actually, yeah, you wear chinos and your checkered shirt and have a smoothie bar and a rapper come on stage because that's relevant to the kids. And you just...
That's the episode I for sure found the hardest, like the saddest. Like I was literally watching that like, oh, this really... Because it felt like the more sort of like traditional, perhaps, you know, putting it very broadly, side of the church... going like, look, see what you've done, this is exactly what we're talking about, like, where is your authentic, genuine, or like worship? And instead you've brought in a load of uplighters, a disco and a smoothie bar, and you expect to that was the episode I was like, oh, this is piercing, but actually it's like you say, it makes comedy or humour a really great tool to think about, well, how is this true for my circumstance and in my parish, and like, how does this play into my experience of how I connect with God? I mean, obviously that's a piercing episode, but the really good one, but the really like one for me is the Easter. You know, when doesn't he meet like Sean Bean on a mountaintop?
Oh,
then he carries his cross through the streets.
I've not seen that full episode. I've just seen that clip where he encounters Sean Bean, who's supposed to be like a Jesus figure.
It has a little bit of a vision on the top of his, like a hill in the park, and he's
was really powerful.
Gosh, I'm nearly crying just thinking about it. Mrs. Weepy's over here. It's so good, but yeah, because I think that's the thing, when you see TV Vicars, you're like, oh my gosh, somebody gets it. They're telling my story, or like, oh, there's another. Because I think sometimes, not to be like Mrs. Violins, but it is a really lonely job, and you're not often with other clergy that you can be like, oh gosh, this happened today, or like, you know, it is an isolating experience at times, I think, to be in Christian leadership and ministry. And I have to say, it's almost empowering, isn't it, to see it replicated in a way that you're like, I totally get that, I get your journey, or like, I can understand how you've got to that place, and I think that makes it really powerful.
On the topic of Sean Bean, he played that vicar, didn't he? A Catholic priest in, what was the name of it? Broken.
Oh,
I only got through one episode of that because there was so much of it that was just so true to life that it hurt. But it was also really good to be seen. And actually, it was gritty and horrible. I would like to watch the rest of it. But actually to watch that episode and go, yeah, this is the reality that we go through. And at times you are dealing with really, really broken people, and that's such a privilege, but it's blooming hard work, and the emotional investment that you have in people, it's really hard to detach from that. And I don't think you should detach that fully, but you also need to for your own sanity and well-being, because if you just took on everyone's sadness all the time, you'd just be a sad little being.
That's why you never hold all these things in your own strength, is it? That's like one of the promises we make. It's like, if you think that being a vicar is because you're a really good listener, or you know the right things to say, then it's like, nope, forget it. But thinking slightly about, although it is really good to be seen again, and having humour and comedy as a like, and even just series where you can resonate. The TV vicar that came to my mind, which is more poking fun at vicars rather than watching it and being like, oh yes, I feel seen, because I do love that. But the one that comes to my mind is the classic Reverend Lovejoy from The Simpsons.
Oh, really?
TV vicars, I'm like, oh yeah, Lovejoy. But hilariously, then like alongside him, Ned, like who's the actual Christian.
Oh, Flanders.
Yeah, I should call Flanders really. Because there, it's like vicars, very dull, very boring, go to church to sleep, well-meaning but very dry. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bit more pokey, funny.
Reverend Lovejoy is one of those vicars who's just lost his passion for it.
Yeah.
And is so cynical and has just been ground into the ground by the Ned Flanders of the world and other people that, I hadn't thought of Reverend Lovejoy.
Oh, bless him.
And the irony of his name.
Yeah.
But then I think there's something about, as we're talking about clergy being, I guess, used as a punchline. And I suppose there's something about, because we are a group of office holders, where we have a role where we're seen to be a moral centre for a community, or we're seen to promote ourselves as the moral pillar of the community.
Yeah.
That leaves us open to being exposed for hypocrisy, because actually it's incredibly difficult to truly be, no one is perfect, and so if you get very too caught up on trying to project an image of yourself that is perfect morality, and you never talk about on some days where you just really struggle to believe, but you just have to keep going, or when you, for the best will of the world, just cannot live up to the standards of Jesus, because no one can. But
No.
I think it's been very easy for people to look at clergy, to look at the church, and look at actually a lot of the wrong that the church as an institution has done. And think, how can you, who claim to be someone who is moral, someone who cares about love and forgiveness and compassion and protecting the poor and the weak, be part of an institution that has hurt the same people you're claiming to protect? How can you be part of an institution that seems to hoard money instead of helping the poor? And one of the ways that people process that frustration, that anger, is by wanting to expose that through humour. And it makes us a target, because I think in many ways we deserve to be as an institution. I think individuals, it's different. Every single clergy person is different and has different ways of being a priest or a deacon or whatever your ministry is, even bishop. I am less offended by people using the institution as the butt of a joke than I am me kind of more specifically, or specific people who, I think particularly if you know someone who is being made the butt of a joke and you say, well, that's not the full picture. But you can see why clergy do become a punchline.
There is silly stuff that we do as well. Like I can understand why we're poked fun at, like just things like the clothes we wear, and the robes. Like, of course that looks silly, and we look like Darth Vader with our capes. Why wouldn't you poke kind of fun at that at times? Because it's true, and you know, we do silly things as well.
And like in The Princess Bride, and the priest there, marriage is it what brings us here together.
I love The Princess Bride. Yeah, we were talking today. I've just come back from this retreat, and we were talking over the dinner table about vicar voices. And vicars who suddenly, when it comes to saying the words at Holy Communion, their voice completely changes from what their normal accent is into the vicar voice. So they might talk like this and then suddenly go, "The Lord be with you." and I don't think some of them realise it. And is there a point where it's too late to tell them that, by the way, you've got a vicar voice?
I remember when we were in college, because we had to do services like like to aid the worship for one another, but also to get like ranked and rated by our tutors. And I remember being so aware of like trying not to have too much of a heavy intonation, even in terms of, you know, how you, not even like what you say necessarily, but how you say like, well, good morning everybody, and a very warm welcome. Today we're gathering together in the chapel. But do you know what I mean? But then also you can't just be like, hi everybody, welcome, we're here in the chapel. So it's like you gotta, there's a fine balance, isn't there, between like presenting and also having this. I think I was accused of having a bit of an M&S, Marks and Spencer's. This is not just any sort of worship. This is premium ordinand worship. And you are welcome.
But you become so self-conscious of yourself when you're in that public space that you do. Do you ever have those almost out-of-body moments when you're like, what on earth am I doing? Or when your brain just stops.
All the time.
Or your brain just stops. There's been like... And you're midway doing something, and when your brain stops, and you just...
Oh my gosh,
you don't know what you're doing. We live stream our services, and to punish myself, no, not really, to learn, sometimes I will watch back the way I present or the way I give notices, or the hardest part of my Sunday is when the children come back from their Sunday school club and they feed back about what they've been doing, and I have to think on the spot about how to respond to the amazing and like epic things that they say or the questions they ask, and I'm like, okay, well, because I love to write everything down, because otherwise I can't tell where my brain will end up. And like you say, sometimes just having it completely, like you say, Kate, no brain at all, and not having a clue what to say, or just being like, everything falling out of your head. It's a nightmare. Sometimes I've had moments where I can't remember if I've done something or not. It's not that I'm on autopilot, it's just my brain will suddenly glitch, and then I have to ask the congregation, have I done? Did I do the collect? Did I?
Yeah. Forgot about that.
Just I don't know. But then that self-consciousness, I think, that's true in a lot of other roles. I mean, I was very briefly a kindergarten teacher, and about 3/4 of my way in, my friends turned to me and said, you do a Minnie Mouse voice when you're teaching.
No.
So I'll do an example. Good morning, children! Super sing-song. Very engaging, I would say.
Yeah, you've got to be though, in a way, haven't you?
Completely developed this persona of this voice, which, because I was teaching in Hong Kong, it wasn't really an English accent, it wasn't an American accent, it was this,
It was a Mickey Mouse accent.
A Minnie Mouse accent.
Minnie Mouse accent, yeah.
So we talked about how we find it difficult sometimes to watch some clergy-centric comedy or TV shows. And obviously that's different for everyone else. But then there's also things like Monty Python's Life of Brian, which I think is quite divisive in the Christian community, in terms of some people find it really funny and some people find it really difficult to watch as well.
Yeah. I'm definitely on team funny for Life of Brian, because it's what we're going to go on to in a moment, actually. If you read some of the Bible stories, they are funny, and there's bits that are really easy to kind of poke fun at, because unless you understand fully the kind of context that the text has come from and who's written it and the intention and the audience and all this different kind of stuff that helps a passage to make sense. And we've gone so wrong as a church so often because we've just read the words and gone, bang, it means this. There are bits that seem very silly. And so, why on earth would you bring a baby, gold, frankincense and myrrh? What a ridiculous set of gifts for a newborn.
So powerful.
And yes, so they are so powerful once you know what the point is of them. But we've got a book here that's called Granny Goes to Bethlehem, and it's the nativity story, but Mary's mum turns up, or Granny, and shoos out the wise men or the magi who've come with these silly gifts, and she turns up with nappies and helps look after the baby and all this.
That's
kind
really
of thing.
good.
Pre-prepared meal.
Never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I think that's the point of Life of Brian and things like that, is actually once you are away from the context. So Life of Brian is about someone who is not the Messiah.
He's a very naughty boy.
He's a very naughty boy. He's not the Messiah, but there are correlating circumstances which make some people think he is, because this was a time of expectation, or at least the context of the story as we have received it from the Gospels, is this was a time of expectation. So you can see how if someone has similar circumstances could be mistaken for the Messiah, but because he's not, a lot of the things that are happening are ridiculous. Because it lacks that context of the God spark making it, kind of giving it that purpose.
I'm now just thinking of clips in my head. And it's making me giggle. Blessed are the cheesemakers. Oh, that's nice for them. Or the bit with the stoning, where it's all the women in beards. Are there any women here? No.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone giggle and be like, "Oh yeah, the bit with the stoning."
Yes.
I have to say, I have watched The Life of Brian once a long time ago, and I remember, like you say, some of the classic quotes. But I think my homework from today is definitely going to be rewatching that bad boy.
Yeah. It's a good one.
I might be deeply offended though. I might come on the podcast next time and be like, "I can't believe we chuckled about such things."
Well, and there are some people who actually it's that what touches your raw parts, and it's too close to things. Jenny, you were saying earlier that when something is really special to you and really important to you, it does really hurt when you're seeing it made fun of or taken lightly.
Oh my gosh, definitely. I feel really protective over Jesus on films or TV. Not that he needs little old me to be like, no, but I do, and I don't need to, and I think it's definitely something though that I need to watch, because I need to make sure it comes from a place that's, I don't know, like I think having a sense of humour is so important, and I think it's something that I need to continually work on as well. And to be humble with. But there are just some things to me, I think, that are so precious about the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus that I'm like, actually, no, I can't, I'm not going to just go along with the giggles, if that makes sense. But I can't think of in my head about what specifically. But I think there are some times where I can imagine in my life being like, oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I don't see it that way. And being a bit of a mood killer in a way, if people are, I don't know, there's just some things that are just too precious. But maybe I'll get more of a sense of humour with age, but I might become more protective, who knows? Lord, only you know.
Oh. So if we then look to the Bible, which is the kind of the key text for Christianity, our holy sacred text, if we look at that, is bits of it funny, or is it something that is just untouchable that we need to hold reverentially and not make fun of?
Because I guess this opens up the whole thing of there's a difference between things being funny in the context they were written in, things being funny in the context of today, the style of writing that's funny, or do you know what I mean? Like funny situations. There's so many different, all poking fun at. There's so many different kinds of funny, isn't there? And I think there might be space for all of that, to be honest. I think there are definitely like moments of like that are called like that would encourage us to giggle and laugh in the Bible, but also hilarious things as well that have been like pointed out in scripture as well in the kind of more modern times.
I'd say there's a combination of things happening with the Bible as a library of books where you have different genres, and I think some of that is intentionally funny, written to be funny, either so that because it's produced in an oral tradition, a spoken tradition, that it by being funny, it's easier to remember. Or you have some which you just is funny now because of different context, changing contexts, or absurdity to the modern ear.
Yes.
Such as there being unicorns in the Bible. Like in one of it, there's
Wait,
unicorns
what?
in the psalm. There's a unicorn. There's a psalm, but has talks about
Oh,
unicorns.
yes, yeah,
Or
yeah.
A particular translation in Book of Common Prayer of one of the psalms talks about being pursued by a congregation of naughty men. Just funny. or Moab is my washpot. It's funny. It's just a funny thing to think about. Or there's things which are missed in translation. But then you also have things which there's parts of the Bible I have to laugh, because if I don't laugh, it's horrifying. This is a collective group of writings by people with different perspectives and different experiences, and I think we're meant to engage in conversation. We're meant to take the Bible seriously and therefore engage in conversation. And the bits I find the hardest of the Bible, like people who say morning prayer with me will know that there are parts of Paul's letters which if I'm allowed to read them or asked to read them, I will do what I call my Paul voice, which is like a Mr. Collins pomposity voice, because I cannot get through the trauma of Paul talking about women without giving him a voice which is not my voice. And therefore it becomes funny, because that's how I'm processing the trauma I associate with those texts. I wonder what our friend Phyllis Tribble and Texts of Terror would think about that. But that's how I engage. Not poking fun at, but needing to cause distance. So that I can take a step back and then engage critically.
Yeah, because we use humour, don't we, so often as a kind of like self-deprecating humour, as a kind of barrier and protection for day-to-day life. And that's interesting hearing you use that while reading those texts.
Because otherwise it's just a really down to the start of the day. You know, it'll ruin your whole day otherwise.
Great, you shouldn't be in your role.
But then there are parts of the Bible that are just funny, or they just make you giggle, because again, we read things into it because that's what we do and our culture.
One of my favourite books of the Bible is the book of Jonah. And Jonah, if you have ever done a school play or studied anything like with a children's Bible, you've probably got the story of Jonah in there, because it's got a big fish that eats someone up and sicks them up on ground. And we tend to stop at that point with it. But I did a sermon once where we went through the whole book of Jonah, because I think, and other people have said as well, that it's deliberately written to be funny, and its context at the time, people would have found it hilarious. And Jonah is like a panto, like the ridiculous things that happen. He gets eaten by a fish and thrown up. Like, that's gross and hilarious at the same time. And the bit at the very end where he's done his... so the story of Jonah's called by God to go and speak to like the worst of the worst people. And Jonah's like, heck no, they're terrifying. I'm going the opposite direction. Gets on a boat. Boat travels out. Big storm comes up. People on the boat are like, flipping it. This is bad news. And Jonah's like, my bad. That's my fault.
I'm running away.
I disobeyed God. I'm running away. And the people on the boat are like, what are you doing? You ridiculous man. It's your big God. You shouldn't have done that. And Jonah's like, yeah, I know, my bad. Throw me overboard. And they're like, fine, okay, on your head be it, and if it's your God. And the storm stops once Jonah's chucked overboard. And the whale, or a big fish, comes and swallows him up, which is ridiculous. And it was deliberately written to be ridiculous. And he goes to the shore, is thrown up, and there he is on the ground. He's like, fine, I'll go off to Nineveh. Off I go. And he proclaims, change your ways, you bad people. And the people in the town are like, yeah, we've been bad, I get it. In fact, we've all been so bad, let's all wear sackcloth and ashes, including the animals, all the creatures. Can you imagine a cat wearing sackcloth and ashes and being mournful, and sheep and cows? It's stupid and ridiculous. And then God forgives the people and everything's fine. And then Jonah throws the biggest strop that he's like, I knew you'd do this. Really stupid. Why do I have to come here if you're going to do this? And then the plant grows up to shade him. And the worm eats the plant. And then Joe's like, oh, I haven't got my shade anymore. Stupid worm. And I'm really cross. And it is supposed to be like this panto of ridiculousness. That was the quickest whistle-stop tour through Jonah.
That was absolutely brilliant.
We should do more of these, by the way.
We should.
Whistle-top Bible stories.
So I think the one person who really kind of taught that to us, that was Richard Briggs, our Old Testament
God love that
lecturer
man. And he
at
does.
Cranmer Hall. And he was just fantastic at pointing out the humour in the Bible. And things like when I always remember him retelling the story of Jacob after his wedding night and waking up and behold there, and just the way he's told. And the reason he can do that is because he studies it on a linguistic level, and he kind of picks that out and then translates it in a way that kind of exposes the humour of the situation. But there's even things which, even, you know, without us having to delve back into the linguistics, are funny. So I really think that the disciples are sometimes used as a comedic device in the Gospels. Yeah. They're used to expose kind of humour, and, you know, sometimes they're just depicted as such idiots. And then Jesus kind of being sassy back at them.
Guys!
And using puns as well. Like, and the I will make you fishers of men, which he says to a fisherman, is like a God tier level pun. Literally.
Yeah.
Sorry,
brilliant.
can I just say that again? It's a God tier level pun. Literally.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of that.
Is it God?
Because Jesus is God.
A tier
And it's
spelling.
God's pun. Therefore,
God
it's a God tier level
level.
pun.
Tier as in T-I-E-R.
T-I-E-R.
I thought it was also T-E-A-R because you were crying with laughter so much.
You
Sorry.
two do not appreciate my sense of
You're
humour.
working with low level.
Sorry,
I'm so excited about that.
God tier
Oh,
level.
sorry.
Yeah, very nice. Well done. Well done. Yeah, what about you, Jenny? Can you think of any particularly funny Bible stories that you enjoy?
Nothing really comes to mind. The only thing I do remember being a younger Christian and giggling about is Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, and thinking of hilarious chat-up lines that we could use from the two lovers that are exchanged. I think we might have talked about this before, about, you know, necks like ivory towers or teeth that are like sheep just come up from the wash. That's hilarious gold. The only other thing that did come into my mind is it's not I guess a funny Bible story, quite traumatic in a way, but it was retold in a funny way. Like you were saying, the power of our teachers and tutors to kind of retell the Bible, you know, and bring out their knowledge to make it funny is just amazing. And I do remember this sketch. I think it was Billy Connolly. And he looks again at the creation narrative, and he retells the story of, you know, the fall of humanity, Adam and Eve eating of the fruit after being deceived by the serpent. And he retells it and says, you know, God comes back into the garden and he's like, what have you done? And he's like, all the trees, I told you not to eat just of this one tree and not its fruit. And now you're going to have to live with the consequences. So for man, as you may remember, he says, right, you'll have to toil the ground, your work will be hard, you know, the fruit won't always bear easily for you, you're going to have a hard life. And man's like, oh no. And then he says to the woman, for you're going to have pain in childbearing, and, you know, you'll want the man to rule over you. And she's like, oh no. I mean, those are pretty intense things. And then he makes this really big point out of saying to the serpent, and for you will crawl on your belly all the days of your life. But he does it in such a hilarious way, because obviously we think of serpents as snakes that don't have legs anyway. So he's being like, you, and he's like, no, God, don't do this, no. Is it like, I don't know. But his situation is already that anyway. So I think he puts a really funny spin on that story for me, which I can't get out of my head of. I can't get out of my head. But yeah, I mean, nothing. I think, the Song of Songs is got lots of funny bits in for me as well. But yeah, I think sometimes it's people's retelling of the gospel or of the Old Testament stories as well. It can be so funny.
And I think that's the storyteller tradition of the Bible, which is where these stories are passed down, and every storyteller puts their own little spin on it, and in that way you rediscover something about the story, because it makes you have a new perspective, or it forces you to look at it from a new perspective. And by being able to laugh, I think that just makes it a little bit of an easier experience sometimes. Because if you're able to laugh at yourself, things often go better for yourself if you can look at yourself and think, oh, I'm being really super serious there. Oh, what am I like? And in the same way, sometimes being able to laugh, not necessarily at, but with different perspectives on the things that we treasure and the things that we believe. And you have someone who just takes you, it gives you that out-of-body moment saying, this is funny, isn't it? You clergy doing your weird dances and weird arm movements around the table, and with your weird voices, wearing these weird clothes and doing strange and silly things, and talking about big fish eating prophets, and men walking on water, and it I don't know, there's just something which for me just adds to my love of these stories, of this faith and of what I do.
Oh yeah, so true. When you're saying that, I'm smiling to myself going, and think of my amazing God that's behind all of that. See what I do with my arms and my funny clothes, because it's so important to how we worship and honour, and the traditions that have been handed down, generations to generations, of how we show who and how God is. And I'm sat here going, look, like you say about the comedy of Jonah and things like that, and it's but look at the amazing God that points to, and I'm sitting here going but I'm not allowed to say the A or the H word because we're in Lent.
And I think it's a running joke, isn't it, about God having a sense of humour when he made me and all this kind of stuff, and that's how we kind of sort our problems. But God definitely has a sense of humour.
For sure.
Think of all the joy and laughter and wonder that we have in the world, and look at the duck-billed platypus. That is a ridiculous creature, and just brings so much joy from creation, and I can't, if God is super serious all the time and intense, and then I'm not on board with that, because actually Jesus, I read about in the Bible, has banter with his mates. Just think of the raucous laughter that must have come with the disciples when they're walking around on their journey, and the teasing that must have gone on, and there's so much of that must have happened.
Reverend Ruthie denounces faith unless God has banter.
I agree with that. I'll sometimes talk about the trickster God, and how I actually have, at least...
I think that's Loki.
But I have an experience of our God as a trickster as well, and how there is a God who plays jokes on us, and who, at least my experience, my relationship with God, sometimes I feel like God deliberately points out my hilarity, the hilarity in my life, or my pomposity or whatever, to make me laugh at myself, and will create situations in my life where I can only step back and say, oh my goodness, what have I been doing? And that's not, I think that brings us back to when we're talking about pranks and the difference between bullying and kind of pranking with a loving heart. And I feel like God doesn't prank, it's not bullying, but I do think there is a relationship where God teases us, and God, because God loves us, God wants to share that relationship with us, and and we're made in God's image. Like, if we have a sense of humour, why wouldn't God have a sense of humour?
Yeah.
I think lots of people talk about Christians believing in a God this kind of old man in the sky, with a beard, and this idea that God is really stern and judgmental. And for some people, actually, that is their experience of God. But that's not the full picture for everyone.
Yeah.
No, indeed. I think it's that whole thing of actually at the root of it, what is humour, what is comedy? And I think of actually that really like satisfying belly laugh, but like that deep joy. And we see the joy. We see joy throughout the Bible, like everywhere. And it might not be in jokes or like, always comedy as we think of it, but there is deep, deep, deep joy. And whenever someone discovers who Jesus is and it changes their life, or I'm thinking when Mary and Elizabeth, when Mary first discovers she's pregnant, she goes to see her cousin who's also miraculously pregnant. And this beautiful scene of two women, like just like almost, I have this image of almost like crying with joy, as they embrace each other and the babies in their womb leap. Do you know what I mean? Like whenever or like when it's like, I'm looking at the parable at the moment of the kingdom of heaven is like, one of the things is finding treasure buried in a field, and the man with great joy sells everything he has so to have this field and to find the treasure. And it's like that's what it's like when we find our a deeper sense of faith, our fulfillment, when we live in the kingdom of heaven, when we strive for that. That joy is everywhere. And at the root of it, that's what I guess we're thinking about, isn't it, when we think about comedy and humour and laughing our heads off.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Toby for editing our ramblings.
Any views expressed in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily represent those of the Church of England or any other organisations with which we are affiliated.
And as always, bless you for listening.
I wanted to take you back to primary school with the joke. Why was the beach wet?
Why, Jenny? Why was the beach wet?
Because the seaweed.
Oh, Jenny.
Don't admit you
Are all your jokes going to be toilet humour?
Yes, they are.